Welcome to the show, everybody. We have a fascinating and very informative guest joining us today, and we're going to get to him in just a minute. But first, I want to share a word from our sponsors. The Pressing the Limits podcast is brought to you by ZionMissionaryChurch.net, where you can listen and watch messages, you can share prayer requests, and you can even find out how to plan a visit. And also by NeuroPowerSource.com. These are resources for your mind, your body, and your spirit. You're going to find all the recommended gear that I use, including the Be Strong bands, the Juve system, as well as the Iron Neck, and more. You'll be sure to want to check it out. Our guest today is Jay Campbell. He's a former champion men's physique competitor and currently a 4-time international best-selling author in the optimized healthcare space. Jay Campbell is a global thought leader on hormones, biohacking, and higher consciousness. Jay helps individuals break free from the limitations of traditional healthcare, which he refers to as sick care, and discover what it means to live life fully optimized. Jay is a no-nonsense, authentic, and fully transparent and fearless in his servant mission of leading humanity toward a full-spectrum optimization of body, mind, heart, and soul. I can't be more fired up right now. Welcome to the show, Jay Campbell.
Man, it's so awesome to be here, guys. I really appreciate you guys having me on your podcast. How can I even live up to that intro? I don't even know where you guys even found that bio. That's awesome. I think that was my social media company wrote that. But honestly, I'm very honored to be here today. And let's get right into it. I mean, I'm sure we can cover a lot of things. We're obviously, let's say it's August 6th, right? And the world is spinning on its axis. So there's so much to talk about. But again, I'm honored and privileged and humbled to be here today with you guys.
Yeah, glad that you're on here because you're going to help change the world literally by some of the stuff we're going to talk about. But we want to get some general things to just so people can begin to understand some of this stuff. Sure. These are kind of new concepts for a lot of the listeners. You are huge in the human optimization space. I want to say hormonal optimization, but it's everything. It's mind, body, spirit. How did you develop your interest in this area?
So, without going, because we got so much to cover, most people that will know me know my story kind of, but for the people that don't, I was kicked in the testicles at 29 years old playing basketball. I was a ex-college and had a small cup of coffee playing overseas after I finished playing college. So, I was a really good competitive athlete, but in my late 20s, I got kicked in the nuts, literally playing in a game, went out to the sideline, was, what happens. And then like about 6 to 7 weeks, 8 weeks later, I started feeling really run down. I went to a PPO doctor who referred me, just again, luck, and there's no coincidences in life, to a endocrinologist who ran some tests on me. And he was like, look, man, you have low testosterone. And at that point in time in my life, I was kind of like, what? I was 29 years old. I was like literally a month away from turning 30. And he's like, well, look, I can fix you. Here's my research. Here's what I've done. The guy actually ended up being a Harvard educated endocrinologist out here in Southern California. His name was Dr. Raymond Scruggs. He says, I can put you on testosterone, have you right as rain, take you off, and you'll be back to normal. So I was like, he's like, go home, talk to your wife about it. I had just been married. It was my first wife. It was a long time ago, back in 1999. We discussed it. She knew that I was a smart guy. I was kind of a biohacker, so to speak, in that time because, I had a minor in molecular biology in college. And so I was always like a nerdy scientific studying guy and dork. And so she's like, yeah, let's do it. See what happens. So I went on, started injecting testosterone at that time. And again, at that point in time in 1999, this guy was world class. Like he knew how to do this. And I was just blessed to be under his tutelage. Fast forward, about 8 weeks, 7 weeks, and I felt amazing. Now, previous to that, at 29, I'd started getting run down. I had like low back issues. I just was like feeling run down. And with 8 weeks of therapeutic testosterone, I literally felt like a new man. And when the doc went to take me off, he was like, okay, well, let's go transition you to HCG. And I was like, whoa, dude, I don't want to come off this. Like, this is Superman. I feel amazing. And so subsequently, fast forward, over the next literal almost 20 years now, I've just become like super studious of the therapeutic values and benefits of using testosterone. I've worked with the greatest doctors. In 2014, to fast forward my story a little bit, some of my guys, my inner circle guys were like, dude, you got to write a book about this. Like, more about this. You look amazing. You're totally balanced. You defy the the myth or just the hyperbole of like guys on steroids are nuts and, not capable of doing things in life and stuff. So you got to write a book. So I went to write a book, or I thought about writing a book, but I reached out to Rick Collins, who's now a very close friend. And I asked him what would happen as a person with no medical background wrote a book on therapeutic testosterone. He said, well, in worst case scenario, you could spend $250,000 with me, to keep you out of jail, and that was enough to like, hey man, I'm a successful guy in sales business of life. I'm not going to write this book. So I shelved it, but I had sent what I had initially read or written to Rick. I'd also sent to Nelson Bergel. And Nelson Bergel was like the guy at the time who had written the first book on testosterone, which was called Testosterone: A Man's Guide. And he saw my white paper and finally wrote me back like 3 months later. He didn't know me from Adam and said, dude, you got to write this book. And I was like, well, Rick Collins told me not to. And he's like, I don't care what Rick Collins said. He goes, I sit on panels with the FDA. You need to put this book in the hands of men. So that was in 2014. He helped me then and mentored me. I always say, give him a lot of credit, stepping on the shoulders of giants. And then I published my book in the end of 2015. And it was obviously a worldwide success. Over the next 2 years, I made friends with a lot of really high level doctors and researchers. And then, I just kind of kept me down the path and then wrote books on fasting. I wrote, of course, the book that really made me who I am, the TOT Bible, in 2018. And then subsequently, I've written these two books, the Living a Fully Optimized Life, Guaranteed Shredded, and the Metabolic Blowtorch Diet, which, the Metabolic Blowtorch Diet is probably one of the three highest, purchased fasting books ever, right? So a ton of people have bought that book. And so, like you said, going back to my bio, I kind of became known as a human optimization specialist. And here I am on your amazing podcast today.
Hey, thanks. I hopefully we have time to talk about all the mistakes that people make with fasting, butter coffee, I'm trying to hold off. Sure. We got so much that we can jump into.
Absolutely.
Why do you advocate for hormone therapy? Because here's one of the things that I believe personally is that if you probably go into a normal doctor and you get in there, he's going to say probably your levels are normal for where you're at in life. I'm going to be 49 next week, and I know if I go into the doctor, he's going to say, hey, you're probably at right where you need to be. But that's not optimization. That's not optimal. So can you talk about that? Why you're such an advocate and passionate about this?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. And, without really disparaging doctors, because, I can, they honestly are doing, for the most part, the best job for what they have available to them, which is zero knowledge, like literally zero knowledge. Like they're not taught about hormones in medical school. There is no standard patient of care methodology that any physician can follow, right out of med school to learn this. This is a very nuanced, very highly skilled, very meticulous. Like I always say, like any doctor who's skilled at prescribing hormones has an experiential body of work, right? They've been doing this for 15 to 20 years. And obviously due to my work, I've been totally blessed really to be able to work with the highest level docs, like the guys who really have been in the trenches doing this. And they'll all tell you, the best ones, that when they first started doing it, they didn't know their asshole from their elbow, right? Like they had to learn and go through this. So, to your statement, yes, the average doctor, if you come in to him, especially a GP or a family doc, and you say, hey doc, I want you to look at my hormones, evaluate my testosterone levels, they're going to say, oh no, you don't need that. You're fine. Because really, in truth, they have absolutely no idea how to even evaluate them. Now, some doctors will, watch this podcast probably and push back and say, oh, that's not true, Jay, but in reality, yes, the average GP or the average family doctor is literally not trained and able to read panels, right? Like, I always say this, like the average doc, when they see a blood testosterone level, they don't even understand that like total testosterone levels, and I don't want to get so esoteric in this discussion, has really no bearing on free testosterone, right? Because your free testosterone is actual measurement marker that means something. Because if you don't have acceptable free testosterone, that means that the testosterone that's in your body, total testosterone is bound and free testosterone is unbound. And unbound testosterone is what your body can actually identically, accumulate and use and obviously cleave. You then don't have any total testosterone. So a lot of times today, especially, and we'll get into this, and why I'm such an advocate for testosterone is the environment is, as you guys know, annihilating us, right? From every angle, from the plastic in our water bottles, from the blue light radiating out of these screens that you and I are on right now, We are under siege and assault in the modern day in every angle, right? So realistically, you have to understand the average doc will see a total testosterone level and they'll say guys at 500, 600, whatever, and say, oh, you're fine. And not realize that his free testosterone is so low, which actually means that he has no testosterone. So again, it's kind of it's not a myth, but it's just kind of like a misnomer if you don't have an understanding of looking at free compared to total testosterone. And most docs never see that. And I see guys all the time, and obviously I consult with guys all the time who get misdiagnosed because of that very fact. But, you know, back to the understanding of testosterone and why I'm such a big advocate for it now is because literally we are under siege. And this isn't just dudes. This is women. This is kids. You know, the average 18-year-old girl right now who gets her blood work done is chemically castrated. And what I mean by that is like they have dominant levels of estrogen. They're what is considered estrogen dominant by blood levels. The average 18-year-old man who gets his blood levels done is emasculated in that they have low testosterone. Like it's insane how low the testosterone is now of an 18-year-old boy. When, you know, 30 or 40 years ago, if you got blood work done, and it wasn't obviously pulled then as much, but literally blood testosterone levels were 300 to 400% higher 30 to 40 years ago than they are now. And again, why is that? It's not a conspiracy. It's just the environment. We are killing ourselves with all of these chemicals and these particulates and these endocrine disrupting things. They're just everywhere. They're in the air that we breathe, the water that we drink, and the food that we eat. Yeah,
and I think we have just an overabundance of estrogens floating around. You know, because I try to tell people this is all the good stuff I'd like to get down. Sometimes we have to go in the rabbit hole on this because there's good estrogen and there's bad estrogen.
Right. You
know, when you're talking about testosterone, some of it is bound, and people don't understand how those things can be bound. The estrogen, we'll get into that later.
Sure.
So what's the biggest misconception? Because when people see this, I don't want to say there's a stigma about it, but there's a lot of misunderstanding about what hormone therapy is. So what's some of the biggest misconceptions that you run across?
So, I mean, it's a great question. Realistically, there's so many, but, you know, I'll give you the biggest ones. I mean, obviously the average man in America today has low testosterone and is not being accurately diagnosed, right? Like either they're ashamed or embarrassed to even go to the doctor to talk about it. Or they go to the doctor and the doctor is not qualified or capable of even diagnosing them, right? So like those two things are the biggest issue. Like I say right now, like you can walk around, right? You can go out in society anywhere. You can go, you know, in Columbus, Ohio, and Los Angeles, and New York City, and Miami, and Seattle. And obviously we can't go out in large groups of people like we once could. But if you did, you would observe that the average man from behind has so much estrogenic body fat now that they actually almost look female. And a lot of the women, you know, are even the opposite. Like a lot of the women look like men, right? So, I mean, we've essentially, again, biochemically created a mutation of our species. And, you know, in my book, the TOT Bible, and again, it's getting dated now. It's published in February of 2018. You know, I have links to a study called the Hebrew University Study. And the Hebrew University Study was like a 30-year all 7 continents, cohort population group of like more than 48,000 men. And they were monitoring their testosterone and their semen levels. And it was done over 30 years. So it's a landmark study. And guys, honestly, it literally shows, and you know, they use a predictive wave pattern, but by 2034 to 2040, somewhere in that range, men will be literally not able to procreate. So essentially the XY chromosome is already on the downward spiral. And, you know, that kind of extends into right now. Like if you know guys in their late 30s who are trying to get pregnant, almost every man in the West today is using some form of fertility medication or program, you know, with doctors like IFV and, you know, intravenous, all this stuff to get pregnant. And again, it's because we are so incapable. We have low natural testosterone. We have low natural fertility. Our sperm is not motile. I mean, it's just a struggle right now for men and women to even procreate. That's how whacked out our society is right now.
Yeah, I was reading a study, and it's been a long time, so I couldn't tell you the exact quotes, but they were taking animals from the swamp. They're talking about even our environment, and I believe it was alligators, and they were talking about how their reproductive organs are shrinking over the past few years. So even in our animal species, we see this because just this overabundance of estrogens in the environment.
Yeah,
So
Dr. Anthony J, his book, Estrogeneration, he's a good friend of mine. I can, if you guys want to interview him, he's a great guy to bring on. But I mean, he talks about the
awesome.
feminization of the fish, like
Yeah.
all the fish in freshwater lakes, streams, tributaries across the United States are literally becoming feminized. So you take a male fish and you put them in the wild, and within 1 year, they literally mutate into females. That's how insane it is. Exactly what you said. All the phytoestrogens and the estrogenic compounds that are everywhere.
Yeah, and so this may be, some of the protocols, because I'd like to get into this. What is the proper protocol for somebody who would say, man, I've got to do some things that the natural approach isn't working enough? Like maybe they're doing the Juve, maybe they're icing their testicles and
Sure.
they're trying everything outside the box they can do. Once you have gone past and you know that you need clinical help, what is the proper protocol for that?
It's a good question. Personally, a lot of people think, well, he's a testosterone guy, so he's always going to advocate going down that path. And I don't. I always tell people, and I have a whole chapter in the TOT Bible. And by the way, we're writing the next book, which will be my last book ever touching hormones, which is going to be called Testosterone Optimization Therapy Decoded, the Biohacker's Guide. So it's going to be very streamlined because, as you know, no one can read today. The Bible is 630 pages and has 900 plus studies in it. So, people don't want to be that technical anymore, but that's cool. But the reality is the path that we're on right now, it's very difficult for any man or woman to maintain optimum, not normal, right? Optimum levels of hormones naturally, right? Now, Dr. Rob Komenarek, who's one of my good friends, definitely one of the top optimization doctors in the world. He's in Dayton, Ohio at Renew Health. He's been prescribing hormones for 23 and a half years, right? So he's been in the game a long time. And I interviewed him in the book and we said, let's classify people. What is the percentage of people that can actually remain hormonally optimized, as they age, right? We took under 30 and we took 30 to 50 and then we took 50 and up, right? And according to him, and again, he's seen thousands of patients and prescribing hormones for 24 years. And he is a very big pro, do it natural until you need the biggest gun in the tool belt, testosterone. And he says that right now, under 30, 20%, this is how crazy it is. Under 30, 20% of men do not need testosterone, right? They can optimize naturally, through being anally retentive, through eating well, eliminating phytoestrogens from their diet, taking the supplements that you talked about, using red light, icing your testicles, whatever you can do as a natural adjuvant, only 20%. And this is under 30, right? 30 to 50 is literally between 5 and 7%. And over 50 is 2%. So think about that. This is coming from one of the top docs in the world. And obviously I have tons of research to verify this. And again, you can just go around and just do the look around method. Most guys over the age of 50 today have a testosterone deficiency. Okay. And how does that show up physically? Well, it shows up the way they have, they have man boobs. They have giant, like I said, regional body fat deposition of a female that kind of comes down right here in the circumference, the pear and the apple-shaped bodies. So it's that automatically, when you start having that kind of visceral body fat in the midsection, that's going to just completely stop the hormone, the axis. You kind of have the triune. You have testosterone, you have the endocrine system, the pituitary, which is insulin, obviously, and then you have the thyroid. And when you have all this feminized estrogenic body fat, visceral body fat deposition, it causes massive inflammation and it shuts down the hormonal cascade. So guys and girls, again, but we're talking about guys right now, basically have no testosterone at that point. And that's the majority of people, right? I mean, that's where we're at. And that's not just in the West, that's just in the world. So I know we're going to talk about inflammation on this podcast at some point, but that's natural. So when you understand that you're over 50, only 2% of dudes actually have optimized testosterone. Now, that's not saying that there's not, 10 to 15 to 20% of guys have normal. Who the hell wants to live normal today, right? You want to be optimized. You want to have great energy. You want to feel great. You want to feel alive. You still want to be sexually active. You want to be able to pick up your grandkids, whatever. But, it's a problem. So, when to answer your original question, I wanted to set that up so everybody kind of understood that because it's really good qualitative information. I obviously recommend testosterone when you're one of those guys, between 30 and 50, And really, it depends on your blood work. It depends on your symptoms. And, guys have to understand that, like, it's not just lab measurement numbers. It's your symptomology, right? Mm-hmm. The number one symptom of a deficiency is literally going to sleep in the middle of the afternoon. You feel like you have brain fog, or you want to most guys, they say, I just want to take a nap. Like, I talked to a guy yesterday, he's a very prominent Google executive. And he's like, dude, I do everything. And at 3:00 in the afternoon, I just literally have to take a nap. And I'm like, well, yeah, dude, that's the number one symptom of a deficiency. And he fought me on that for like 5 minutes, until I was like, no. And I started giving him evidence. And then it was just like the light of God, shined in his brain. And he was like, oh my God. Right. So, I mean, cause this guy was in decent shape, but that's the thing, is like, you can even be in like lean, quote unquote, physical shape and still be suffering from a deficiency. So that is a symptom when you're in that age zone. Again, knowing how difficult it is to do all these things to be optimal, naturally, I just say testosterone as the biggest tool in the tool belt is the best adjuvant, again, when done right. And we can get into like, what's the best protocol? What do you believe? Because obviously there's a lot of ways that they deliver testosterone in the market today. And most of them are not optimal and line doctors' pockets who are doing it. So it's like, it's, to me, it's critically important whenever I do a podcast and people ask me, I always say, like, what are the best ways to do it?
Yeah. And there's so many things you're talking about. People are getting close to, so I'm 49, lift heavy all the time, do feats of strength. I know I've shot my adrenal glands, and I'm just thinking about how many guys, if you're working out, which we'll get into more later, there's some benefit to lifting heavy. You're going to get a little boost in hormones, but most of us, our environment, adrenal fatigue, they don't get enough sleep, all these things, it just makes it impossible. And you're talking about the whole sleepiness. One of the things I'm also noticing in society as a whole, because there's a lack of testosterone, it doesn't seem like guys have that drive attitude, or I know this is taken negatively, but that aggression towards life. Like, what I'm talking about? Like, I'm going to go out and be the alpha male. I don't think we have very much of that today because of this thing. And I talk to guys and it's like, yeah, I just don't have the drive to become the best or to, really strive to go to the next level. So if people are experiencing these things, would you best prescribe, if you went into the doctor, a cream version, or would you go injections?
So both. So really,
okay.
So those, it's a great question because you just set me up perfect. I mean, really, those are the only two what I would call, ways to optimize in a very, tried and true fashion. We have data, we have probably 65 years of data from the Russians and the Bulgarians on using testosterone, injectable testosterone therapeutically. Of course, we also have the golden age bodybuilders and stuff like that who are still around, who didn't, abuse their bodies and do all sorts of crazy shit like the guys that do today. Unfortunately, as technology's evolved, so have the mindsets of people who are really not understanding this. And so again, they have the whole theory that like, if less is good, then more must be better. Right. And it's obviously never that case. In fact, I always go back to Tim Ferriss's like less is more principle, the MED principle, the minimum effective dosage. Should always do the very, very minimum to see how you respond, and then progress, to where you want to go and stuff like that. And even with therapeutic testosterone, some of the greatest teachers in that industry, like Dr. John Chrysler, he had a theory that you start low and go slow, right? Like that was like literally how you do it. But, to what you said, the only two methods or methodologies with verification as far as studies and again, long-term patient history of care is injectable and cream. Now, I was a guy that used injections. I've been on therapeutic testosterone now for close to 20 years. In fact, it'll be 20 years in February. And by the way, we're the same age, man. I turned 50 in February. But like the reality is, I went on the cream, which I'll get to in a second, at the behest of my physician at the time, Dr. Keith Nichols, who's the guy who's helping me write the newest book right now. Amazing physician. He's at Tier 1 Health and Performance in Chattanooga, Tennessee. It's tier1hw.com. Him and Dr. Scott Howe are two of the best guys in the world. And Scott Howe is actually a guy you guys should probably bring on your show because he's like the leading androgen researcher in the world. And he talks about how AIs are killing guys. And we'll get to that in a minute too. But the reality is that I use injections for 17 years, right? Injections work amazingly well. You got to learn what your balance rate is. Like, what's the dose that's perfect for you? For me, it was always 150 milligrams a week, 3 shots. I was evolving it too, as I learned, initially it was 1 shot a week. And then we got a little bit smarter and we got the 2 shots a week. And then, it was like, well, if 2 shots a week is, we should probably do every other day. And then it was even like, well, every other day is not good, then why not do it every day? Because then the body, sees it as, natural, and it's mimicking the body's natural endocrine function. So, the reality is, and we wrote about this in the book, in the TOT Bible, from an injection protocol procedure, whether you inject every day, every other day, or twice a week, you're probably going to get very similar benefits. Muscle gain, obviously cognition, improvement, reduces inflammation, gives you much better energy, will improve somewhat libido and sexual function, stronger erections, blah, 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 all the things that testosterone does. Now, I switched in 2018 to what is called transscrotal testosterone cream. Now, I had used cream at the very beginning of my testosterone exploration, back in 2000, somewhere between 2000 and 2003, right? When I was just starting to use testosterone, and I was working with Dr. Scruggs, and he was like, hey, do you want to try the cream? You don't have to inject yourself. It's less invasive. And I did. And at that time, I was putting cream in here, or putting cream on the inside of my thighs. And I never really got the feeling that I got from injection. I was much more stable, much more balanced with injections than I was using the cream. So I just kind of ruled it out. So when Dr. Nichols said, no, dude, you got to put the cream on the base of your nuts, which is, the application is called transscrotal. I was very resistant. I was like, nah, dude, I did that a long time ago. It didn't feel as good as injections. Not going to do it. And he kept like banging on me and was like, read this study, and there was a study done actually in 2017 about the transscrotal application and how it was 8 times more absorbed because that the thin membrane of the scrotum is, again, 8 times better absorbed or enhanced right there from an absorption issue. So anyway, I finally broke down and I gave him, he sent me a bottle of it, he just sent me like a bottle of his own. He's like, just try it. Just stop your injections for 2 weeks and just give it a chance. So I did, and, he was right. And, all I can say is when I compare and contrast injections versus the transscrotal, the truth is very simply this, like all the results that you get when you're doing it correctly, of course, are similar. The difference being for transscrotal is that because it's on the base of the scrotum, you get a higher dihydrotestosterone, which is DHT effect. And DHT is the most powerful anabolic signaler of the anabolic hormones. It's actually more prominent than testosterone itself. So you will have a little bit more sexual function, a little stronger erections. And also, for a guy like me in a long-term relationship, obviously monogamous, you just can get ready faster, right? It's just, I don't know how to really describe it. Like maybe it's a dopamine signaling thing, but you can just be excited and aroused a little bit faster. As far as all the other things like strength and muscle gain and again, enhanced cognition, it's very similar to injections. But obviously, and I always say this, the biggest thing is you're not injecting yourself, right? I mean, I was injecting myself for 17 years. Now, of course, I'm using very small gauge needles like 28, 29 gauge. I even experimented with insulin needles and I, injected myself like right down here in the sub-Q area, like in the midsection, right around the lower abs and stuff. And I never felt really that good there. Some guys are okay. They inject right there. I don't have a lot of body fat. So it's like, it was always just kind of weird for me. I would get like a little bit of cellulitis if I injected there. So I was always injecting right here, right? I was injecting in my shoulder, my delt, up here. And again, really small needles. And then of course in my quads. But dude, over time you get scar tissue, even with tiny needles, you get scar tissue. So, he convinced me, he's like, look, dude, you don't have to carry needles with you anymore. That's another thing too, right? It's a hindrance, especially if you travel as a businessman all around the world, because you're always constantly like sneaking your needles in your hygiene bags, and you never know. And, I was blessed. I travel a lot. I was never stopped, but I've heard horror stories from guys, even special forces guys. I have a lot of those guys I work with who had been. And so, for guys like that, they're like, dude, the cream is a blessing, right? It's like a godsend because I can just put it, in a unlabeled like container in my hygiene bag. And even if they open it up and stuff, they just look like they think it's a skin cream. So no one's ever going to know. So, I mean, again, there's a lot of benefits from using the cream if you travel, and obviously it's less invasive than injections. But, guys are always like trying to ask me, come on, bro, is it better? Are you going to gain more muscle? Is it going to make your dick bigger? That kind of stuff. And it's like, no, it's not. But it does have those, 2 major benefits. And so, again, from a travel perspective, and then it's less invasive. And then slightly, I think you get a little bit more enhanced sexual function.
Yeah, and I think it's so interesting you're talking about the skin of the scrotum. There's something there. They even talk about, the photocells that are there. There's something about the thinness. I think that's why the Juve is so effective there, because there's something about the way the skin is that it's very responsive in many different areas. So I love hearing you share that. And just got to keep going because there's so much you want to cover today.
Well, let me tell you something actually to that, because you're going to be really excited. So I'm actually involved with a company right now that is coming out with a patented red light penis pump. So essentially the same thing that Juve does right down there, they will actually have a technology that when you are using it, are you familiar with the acoustic wave device, the Phoenix or the Rocket? Are you familiar with that company?
I wanted to talk to you about that because that's something you still want to be able to do.
Those guys also are coming out with a red light penis pump that uses the same tech that you're talking about with Juve, but is obviously much more highly focused because your scrotum and the base of your shaft will be in that device as the red light's on. So, and as you know, there's definitely clinical research out there that says that, it will increase free testosterone. Obviously, Ben Greenfield's talked about it. The thing about that, though, and I always want to quantify this, is because a lot of guys in the biohacking space, there's one guy in Australia who I'm now friends with. His name's Lucas Allen. He's big on the icing the testicles and all that stuff. All of those gains are very transient in nature. Mm-hmm. And I always want to be very specific with guys like that because they get caught up on all that stuff. So what I mean by that is if you do it every day, then yeah, it's great. But if you stop, it's not going to last like therapeutic testosterone. So, people need to understand the classifications and the difference. Like even Juve, right? Like I've got the biggest Juve thing in my house. I'm a sponsor for them and stuff. I mean, I don't use it every day, right? Like my life is just too complicated that I can use it every day. My wife, on the other hand, every day, she uses it for like 5 or 6 minutes on her face and stuff like that. She's really methodical about that. But so anyway, the point is like, if you're not doing it every single day, it's definitely not going to be similar to like the effects that you're going to get from testosterone. And again, that's why I always say testosterone is the biggest hammer in the tool belt. And if you want to make sure that you are optimized in this onslaught of shit that they are hitting us with, it's usually the best option.
Yeah, because you talked a little bit about this idea with the pump. Will this be more like a laser focus, or will it just be like LED? Because I know I've spoken for V-Light before, and I know that they make 2 different products, and the laser seems to get much better response than LED.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's going to be using both technologies, but essentially, it's going to be like a focal point. Yep.
So just to touch on the Phoenix, since we already said it, people are probably wondering, what is the Phoenix? It's formerly was the Rocket, right? If I remember right.
It's actually both. Yeah. So I'll just give a highline. And obviously I don't work for that company, but I am their master affiliate. So essentially I am kind of like, I was close to being involved with their company. I have meetings with their ownership every day, almost, or every other day. But so basically they've created a total, golden age technology device. And it literally harnesses the power of vibration, acoustic wave, to use on the shaft of the penis. It also heals, like you can use it on soft tissue. I've used it on my shoulder to heal like my shoulder injury, which is literally amazing. I mean, I've done a couple podcasts about it. Actually, I'm going to be doing probably a live stream in the next week or so, maybe 2 weeks, demonstrating how you use the device for healing. But on top of like healing soft tissue and, getting rid of erectile dysfunction, it also removes cellulite for women. So it's literally insane. I mean, it's $1 billion company. I mean, Forbes has already done a study on them and where they're going and all this stuff. But basically any guy, whether you have erectile dysfunction or not, and I don't, I'm very open about that, but it's an optimization tool. So, as I say, any man who has sex wants this device because it's literally going to make your penis thicker, more sensitive. It's going to increase venous architecture, which is increasing the vascularity of your penis. It's absolutely going to make it bigger. Some guys gain up to 3/4 of an inch. I mean, everyone in length, everyone's going to experience enhanced girth. Now, it's funny because I have to say this now. I have to qualify when I say everyone. There are always people out there that are going to experience nothing because they're mentally fucked up. And what I mean by that is, if you're a person who has been on SSRIs or other fucking god awful big pharma garbage, and your brain's dopaminergic signaling pathways and dendritic pathways are fried, It's not going to do shit. Like it'll still work. Like you'll actually see your penis gain veinage architecture, but you won't feel it because your brain is so fried. And honestly, bro, it's like, it's sad because there are literally millions of men out there who cannot get an erection because they've been on those drugs for so long for depression. When you and I both know all they ever needed was testosterone. They never.
Man. Now you're getting me fired up right now.
Dude, it's first line of defense. It's like the best doctors now know, and this will be eventually coming out, but most depression in men is caused by a testosterone deficiency, right? Which is also, amplified by a thyroid deficiency, insulin insensitivity. They have like their thyroid. Their what do you call it? Their chemoreceptors in their pancreas have shut down.
Yep.
And so they just, they eat something and their insulin goes boom. And then, that throws off thyroid, that throws off the endocrine. So everything is like very, synergistically intertwined. God was a really smart dude. And, when you get one tool, or not one tool, but just one piece in the wheel that breaks, everything is shutting down. So it's like, it's sad. I'm getting a lot of messages from guys out there. They're like, dude, the Phoenix doesn't work. And I was like, how the fuck does that work? And then I started talking to like their chief medical officer, who's like one of the world's top urologists, Dr. Paul Thompson. He's like, Jay, I deal with guys like this every day. He's like, they are so fucked from the drugs they've been on for so long. And again, that's what big pharma does to people, man. That's why, I always say, obviously we're talking about human optimization, health optimization, the difference between sick care, which is obviously, the medicine from big pharma, pills, making people sicker, dying broke at the end, and then, dying for whatever pills from the side effects from that other pill, versus what I teach or preach and live in, which is optimization, which is like taking responsibility for your own health. Don't even going to see a doctor, finding a functional medicine or a holistic healer or someone like that. People were like, but Jay, you recommend testosterone and that's a drug. And I'm like, no, it's not a drug. It's actually a hormone that your body makes naturally. You're just taking a form of it, not even a synthetic, a bioidentical form, to maximize what your body is already losing as you age, and also from the chemical onslaught.
Yeah, so this is such good stuff. I don't know how anybody would not benefit from angiogenesis by creating new vein. That was intriguing to me. That's why I got to check out your website and find out more about it, because just in my past rotator cuff surgeries from doing ridiculous benching over the years.
Oh, dude, this thing will be unbelievable on your shoulder. I mean, that's what I tell people is like, well, first off, they're coming out with another device, which will be for cellulite, right? And obviously most women are the ones that suffer from cellulite, and they're making that like the shape of a Dove bar soap. I actually have the device. Hold on. Because you never know when I might be on a podcast. Right?
There you go.
So this is the Phoenix / the Rocket. And, without going into a detailed story, it was originally called the Rocket. They launched in October of last year from a pre-sales. I was the master affiliate, so I did a podcast. I even had a treatment with the prototype. We put it out on YouTube. It's got a lot of views. And then, it was supposed to come out in the end of January, and obviously COVID happened. Their manufacturing processes in China, boom, that was shut down. As soon as, China production picked up, end of April, they were about to launch, and Gainswave, which is the big, in-clinic high-end exotic company, sued them because they knew that this would be like curtains. And that stopped them then too. And so subsequently now, 3 months later, there was 3 co-founders. 2 of them were prevented from selling it under the likeness of the Rocket, but the third one could do whatever he wanted. So he changed the name. And he's a brilliant guy, by the way. He's a patent holder too. His name's John Hoffman. And they made this, that used to say the Rocket, and with a 3D printer, and put the Phoenix over it. Honestly, no lie, bro. Like one day, this story of this company will be a movie that will probably make who knows what kind of money, because like John Hoffman and I, in one night, I don't like to take credit, but he gives me credit, came up with this like in one night, and then went to market in like the next 20 days. And again, if you knew the real story and everything, and that will all eventually come out, it's pretty unbelievable. But, fast forward to where we are now on August 6th. They pretty much are caught up to all the pre-orders now. They probably have a couple thousand people around the world that are still waiting on shipments that should have everything fulfilled within the next 2 weeks or maybe even less. I mean, I'm getting emails, hundreds of emails a day right now saying, hey, I got it. Oh my God. So, but it's, this is how it looks. And, I'm not going to plug it in right now, but this basically, you just turn it on and hit the button and it lights up. and you get up to 19 minutes per treatment. And, you literally hold it like this, grab the tip of your dick, pull it out, and you just go down, the side shaft, the top, and then the other side. And you just do it over and over again until it shuts off. And then once it stops, you have 36-hour lockout, right? Because angiogenesis, you want to give it that time. Now, the cool thing that they're going to be doing probably or releasing soon is a different, and I don't know how it's going to look yet, but for healing, because you can still use this as healing, right? Like it's like this.
Okay.
Right. And honestly, it's very simple. This tip it kind of presses in just a tiny little bit, if you can see on the camera. Doesn't hurt. There's no pain. It's a little bit loud because it's a huge energy signature. Sounds kind of like a jackhammer, it's a muted jackhammer. Like if it's in your house, it's not going to drive people nuts. You definitely have to get used to the sound, but you just go in like this. And you just move it like that. But dude, there is nothing like this for healing. I mean, I did one session on my shoulder and I thought it was like it would just, it was just a short-term feeling. And, the inflammation and the range of motion issue that I had for years would just it would come back, and it was just like short-term. And then I was like, I woke up the next day and I was like, what the fuck? I mean, dude, I couldn't go any higher here now. And I can literally do overhead shoulder presses now. So it's like truly unbelievable. And now I've done, I do like one session a week on my shoulder with this. And bro, it's like nothing else.
Dude, you got me fired up right now. I mean, I've had shoulder issues, like I said, from my own thing, from doing stupid stuff, bending steel all the time. And
of course. Of course. And it will absolutely, as long as you're not bone on bone. And that's what I was just going to tell you. You cannot put it into the bone.
Okay.
It has to be in soft tissue. So, you'll find the grooves in the humerus, between the clavicle joint and the SI, through here and stuff like that. You'll be able to go in and deep. But dude, honestly, it's a fucking miracle for me. Literally.
Well, speaking of miracles, because we got to keep, there's so much, like I said, you are such a wealth of information. Let's talk a little bit about metabolic flexibility. I mean, you've got two great books, the Blowtorch Diet, Guaranteed Shredded. Talk a little bit about that, because there is so much misinformation on the nutrition area out there.
Dude.
I mean,
it's insane, dude, how crazy it all is. Yeah, dude. So obviously, that's a whole podcast, and I'll go really, really as not as deep as we could, but enough to people understand. A lot of people don't know this about me, and I've never really talked about this on any podcast, so it's a perfect time to say this. But when I was in my early 20s, way before testosterone, way before anybody knew who I was, I was always, like I said, I was very technical, very dorky. I was on alternate miscellaneous fitness weights. Do you remember that? Do you remember any of those groups? Like the AOL Society and CompuServe and all that shit, where it was, just you'd log on, and it wasn't even the internet. It was just like Usenet groups. And it was like guys like me, like you, very renowned, famous dudes, right? That's how I met Charles Poliquin.
Okay.
I mean, I met a lot of really amazing people back then, but one of the people I met who's also infamously famous, Lyle McDonald, right? Like the guy that wrote the original ketogenic diet book. Well,
wow.
Lyle's insane. And, he's openly admitted that now, but he's brilliant. And I was working with him. I was essentially like his crash test dummy for the ketogenic diet. We were on this group called Low Carb and Exercise List. And there were a lot of luminaries that were on that list. Now, if you go back and see some of the people that, Charles Staley was there. I mean, there were so many guys, and we were all experimenting on ourselves, for test or for data on doing ketogenic diets, right? So I was 25, 24 years old, completely natural, but again, really smart, really into biohacking, and I was learning from the smartest guys on the planet. I mean, if I started mentioning names, Dan Duchesne.
Oh yeah. Ultimate Orange.
Charles Poliquin. I mean, all of these guys I became friends with. And, we were writing about biohacking before anybody even knew what the fuck the word biohacking was. But I tell you that because, dude, I did a ketogenic diet for 3 years in a row, right? And I was doing cyclical ketogenic diet, targeted ketogenic diet, long-term, we called it hardcore, where you would go 14 days, deep keto. And then you would just fucking eat 10,000 calories a day for 2 days in a row and splurge, just see how much glycogen you could jam, into your muscles. So, I mean, I was an absolute crash test dummy, bro. I mean, straight up a crash test dummy. And, I found out that if you do a ketogenic diet the way it's supposed to be done, not the way these idiot keto bros today talk about ketogenic diets. And by the way, I'll just say this for the record. I mean, 90% of people who do ketogenic diets don't even get into ketosis. They don't know what the fuck they're doing.
Yeah, I agree.
These are the type of people that like eat tons of, fast food burgers and say, oh, I'm in keto, bro, because there's no carbs in it. And they're like, no, motherfucker, you ate so much protein that all that protein converted into sugar through gluconeogenesis, and you're not in keto, right? So I don't want to go down that path, but most people don't even know what keto is. But when you're really doing it right, it's 13% protein and the rest fat, right? So it's like, how do you calculate that? Well, we were doing it. We knew what we were doing, and again, Lyle wrote his book, the first book on ketogenic dieting, which is still a masterpiece, which was called A Ketogenic Dieter in Theory and Practice. And I wanted to tell you all this because when I attempted, bro, to come out of that, dude, I was shell-shocked for 4 months. When you stay in ketosis for that long, it retards insulin metabolism. So like when you try to be a normal bro and like eat carbs again, you go into like a fucking coma. Like I'm not kidding you. I remember coming off of that diet and going on a cruise with my girlfriend who turned out to be my fiance and ended up being my first wife. And dude, that was the worst experience of my life. I mean, I was literally like walking around the ship like this, and it took again like 3 months before I was even a normal person. And I gained all this water weight. I mean, I look like a fucking bloated tuna fish, right? So I always tell people, like, back to metabolic flexibility, that you absolutely have to allow your body the flexibility of utilizing whatever energetic system based on, the constituents of the food or the fuel that you're giving yourself to, utilize relative to your energetic demands, right? So what I mean by metabolic flexibility is like, let's say you want to fast, right? Which obviously, I'm a big advocate of in my books. You also can't just go without eating a specific macro or micronutrient, right? So it's like, let's say you're a bodybuilder, right? And, we'll compare a bodybuilder to a strongman to an endurance athlete, all three of those athletes can obviously rely on specific types of fuel source. A bodybuilder is obviously going to mostly rely on carbohydrates and protein and fat, right? Healthy fat. And a strongman, if they're like super advanced right now, might be able to get away with like a fasting, high calorie, up and down, alternate, macro, shifting their macros. And then like an endurance athlete can literally just do straight keto, right? Because their body can now run on the fats, especially for an endurance athlete who's like, highly evolved and really needs to like have max energy at like long durations. Now, obviously that's changed a lot. 20 years ago, it would have been the opposite, right? They thought that endurance people needed carbs. But anyway, the bottom line is if you're metabolically flexible and you're any of those three people, you can eat whatever the fuck you want relative to when your energy demand is the highest, right? So for a bodybuilder, you just trained a 2-a-day session. You just smashed it, right? You fucking trained at high reps, moderate reps, and low reps, and you killed it. And you did 2 days. You're a pro bodybuilder, most likely, right? That dude is pounding carbohydrates. You're eating probably 350 to 500 grams of carbohydrates. And I'm not even talking about whatever drugs they're on, but you're eating 350 to 500 grams of carbohydrates that day. And guess what? Your body will handle that carbohydrate intake because your glycogen is rammed to the floor because of the intensity of your training sessions, right? Now, the strong guy, he's not training that intensely. He's lifting heavy, but he's doing like 1 RMs and 3 RMs. And so his energy demand is not the same. So he is not going to eat that many carbohydrates. He's going to eat probably 150, per session if he trains 2 or 3 times a day, but he's not going to eat that much, but his body will still utilize those carbohydrates. Now switch over to, again, that endurance athlete. That endurance athlete is just consistently swimming, running, biking, right? Might even be 14 hours in a day if they're in a triathlete or triathlon or something, and, or 16 hours and 8 hours of sleep and then keep going, whatever, Tour de France, that kind of shit. They don't have to have all those carbohydrates because their body is running on ketones. So their fuel is just going to be to replenish protein and replenish essential fatty acids, right? So what I mean by all three of those examples is they are metabolically flexible relative to the energetic demands of their training. So a guy like me, right, doing guaranteed shredded, or, that's this advanced version of the blowtorch diet, every other day I fast. Today, Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays, and Sundays are fasting days for me. So I'm not going to eat. I did cardio this morning on my life cycle bike in my house, which is normally anywhere, depending on my, schedule, 30 to 45 minutes, steady state. Okay. And I'll get to why you do steady state when you're fasting in a second, and then I'll fast all day today. I think my wife and I are going to do one last trip before they shut down the world. So I'm going to be planning on going to Cabo, I think at the end of this month, right? So I'm going to be doing probably a second cardio session tonight before I eat, okay, before I break my fast. So I'll probably fast for 20 to 21 hours and do 30 to 40. I'll probably do 45 minutes tonight. And I did about 41 minutes this morning. So I'll do 2 cardio sessions before I break my fast, and I'll have fasted for 21 hours, and then I'll eat. Okay. And then tomorrow I will train with weights in my fucking garage, which is getting to be better. I'm adding some equipment as I go. And then I'll eat carbs all day. Right. And I don't, splurge like the bodybuilder would. I'm not eating 400, 500 grams of carbs, but I'd probably put away 200, to 250, maybe even 275 grams of carbs. And I eat relatively clean: white rice, brown rice, sweet potatoes, whatever, oatmeal. But again, like when you get your body charged to the point of like every other day you're fasting for 20 hours, you're utilizing the processes, the biochemical cascades of hormesis and autophagy. Okay. And you're doing it consistently. Your body gets into a very dynamic rate of change where every day it shuts down the biochemical processes and cascades when it's fasting, and then it increases them on the next day when you're eating. And so your body continually stays in a dynamic, not fixed and not static, homeostatic mechanism where your body is just getting used to like, okay, today is calorie shutdown day, or I don't get any, but I increase, the adrenaline, I increase through hormesis and autophagy and through a catecholamine release. I increased the rate of thermogenesis. And then the next day, through the increase in food, the body's like, oh, wait a minute, you just confused me because now you just went up from where I was yesterday. So, okay, well, I have to accelerate my caloric burn and my resting thermogenic rate. So you continually keep your body in a state, again, of change, but change for the best, because the body sees one day of no carbs, no calories, reduced intake, to higher food intake, where it's like, okay, I got to process this. And it just keeps going and keeps going, so that you never, ever, get to a point where your body becomes static, and weight loss stalls, or you just feel like shit. And so, again, I'm biased to it, but I've done a lot of research on them. That's why I think that every other day fasting programs or protocols, and there's many out there now, are the best, because again, it keeps the body in a dynamic state, and you as a person remain metabolically flexible to eat whatever you want. Also, when you're doing this, obviously, and I didn't say this, but I'll say it now, is like you can have splurge meals, right? Like, especially on days like when you're eating after you just fasted 21 hours the day before. If you want to have like a fucking giant bowl of ice cream and 2 slices of apple pie or cake or whatever, you can do that. We can talk about metformin and how that also curbs that. But the reality is like you get to a point where your body can handle eating like that, and it's not going to harm you. You're not going to have a lot of fat deposition, because again, your body is so efficient at processing carbs and so efficient at all those biochemical processes.
Let me ask you 2 questions about that. First, when you did start out, were you on the Duchenne diet where you were kind of doing the depletion as the week went on and then loading on the weekend?
Oh yeah, I did all of that, dude. Honestly, Duchenne and Lyle and me were talking so much. So quick story, like I met Dan one time, and this was at the end of Dan. Like this was the very end, he had maybe 4 more years left. And we met at the Hard Rock Cantina in Tijuana, Mexico.
Wow.
Right? Yeah. And we talked for 3 hours. It was just me and him, like really hardcore. And how I actually met him, now we had been talking forever via email. He put a contest out again through these Usenet groups of a bodybuilder, a very esoteric, no-name bodybuilder who looked absolutely amazing on the cover of Body Opus. And if you remember that book, that bodybuilder is a guy by the name of Hans Hobstocken. He died. But he trained at the same gym that I was training at.
Dude, that's crazy.
In Foothill, in Monrovia, California, at Foothill Gym. And honestly, again, there's no coincidences in life. Dude, I trained at that gym for 6 months of my life. And in the 6 months I lived, or maybe it was 7. In the 6 or 7 months I trained at that gym, I met Hans. We actually became friends. And that was, of course, when I was talking to Dan. Again, this is back in like literally 1996, 97, maybe 98. I think it was 97. He put that thing out in that Usenet group. And I was like, I instantly responded. I was like, that's Hans Hobstock. And he wrote me back. He's like, how the fuck do you know that? And then we started, becoming friends. Again, this is before cell phones.
It's crazy. So
totally nuts, dude.
With that, when we talk about fasting, can you just give, I know we're running out of time, but can you give just some common mistakes people make with this? Because I think there's a big misconception about what fasting is. Can you kind of tell what some people, why they don't get results with fasting?
Absolutely, man. And it's a great question. And we still have plenty of time, man, 24 minutes.
Sweet.
The way I look at the fasting is that the only way, and this is the science, the dork, nerdy J. Campbell response, and they know this from, interpreting the data. You're not fasting until you're about 18 or 19 hours without calories. And, fasting, measured at the gut response where you have catecholamines, which are fight or flight hormones like norepinephrine, and other, chemicals that I can't think of right now, noradrenaline. You essentially are 18 to 18 and a half hours in at hormesis or at autophagy. So all these people who think they're fasting, like by not eating for 14 to 16 hours, are not fasting, right? Now, if you're a great, big, morbidly obese person and you only go from eating every hour and a half to without eating 14 to 16 hours, then of course you're going to have weight loss. And so a lot of those people think that, oh, wow, I started intermittent fasting and blah, 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 but that's not fasting. That's just literally not stuffing food in your mouth. So obviously my books are, designed to tell people, and again, there's, and I explain these really well in the first book, in the Blowtorch Diet, which is really the Dummy's Guide to Fasting. I really recommend that book before you go to this book, because this book is like hardcore, right? And it's taking those principles to like the ultimate level with drugs and meds and gray market stuff. But you should, as a woman, and again, women and men are different. And very simply, women obviously evolved to be the maternal caregivers. And so their insulin response is a lot shorter than a man's. And then obviously the man was the hunter. He was out there long times of food without, in famine, before he brought home a giant, kill or whatever from a wild game or that they caught. So a man could go a lot longer. And so our insulin metabolism is evolved in the same way. So normally most men can fast longer than women can. And again, it's not all true for everything. And there's outliers, and a lot of women can fast just as long as men. But by and large, women usually cannot fast as long as men. And again, that's totally due to maternal child rearing and child providing and caring for reasons. And then there's also the ethnic differentials that, like Dr. Peter Diamo wrote about in his book, The Blood Type Diet, right? So certain people whose genetic lineage is closer to the equatorial poles have much more efficient insulin sensitivity, because again, they grew up with food was abundant, right? It's like hanging on branches where they're at. So they're eating more regularly versus like people like me who have more Slavic, Northern European ancestry, way farther away from, abundant food sources and warm temperature, climates. We were, growing and evolving on the tundra, right? So we had to go way longer without. So again, and again, Dr. Diamo in his book, The Blood Type Diet, brilliant guy, by the way, brilliant book, talks about that. He's the only guy I've ever seen that actually went down that path of studying that. And I think if more people looked into that, you would have a much better understanding of like the type of people that can, fast and go low carb and go without sugar for a longer time than others. But like I said, everyone can train themselves to fast. My books tell you as a woman that you should go 16 to 18 hours. And as a man, you should go 19 to 21 hours or 18 to 22 hours. And then again, it takes time to get fast adapted. That's what I call it, fast adaptation. It normally takes anywhere from 5 to 10 days. Some people it's a little longer. Some people it's shorter. I've seen people like literally become fast adapted in 3 to 4 days. But once you become fast adapted mentally, you don't have the issues that most people have when they first start fasting, right? And what are those issues? Very common are you feel malaised. You have like, what I call just this weird feeling in your stomach. And the truth of that is most people have all sorts of nasty shit growing in their microbiome, over a lifetime of, eating like crappy food or boxed foods or even, alcohol or too much sugar or whatever chemicals, that are in the food sources of today. And those cause growth in our microbiome. So ultimately you want to allow those that microbiome growth or whatever's in there, candida, yeast, whatever's growing in there to be killed off, and fasting will do it. And so once you kill off the majority of that stuff, you don't have those hunger pangs. You don't have that weird biochemical, like feeling of malaise that you get at certain hours. Because a lot of people, when they first start fasting, about 10 hours, they literally have a drop in blood sugar. And they're like, oh my God, I got to eat. I feel like I'm going to die. Right. And I always tell people, like, this is, the mental game now. You got to fight it and you got to get over it. And, once you do, it becomes much easier. I mean, for me, dude, I can literally fast for 5 days without even eating a bite. And I have absolutely no, I don't even have a thought process. Now, obviously, if I get around people and I start smelling food, then that's a different thing, right? You're in a big environment and all these people are cooking or whatever like that. That can play havoc with you. But, once you become fast adapted, you can go pretty long. But normally, like the most advanced people that follow my protocols, they probably go, and this is what I'll do. Like, I'll probably do this tonight myself. I'll probably won't eat. And then I'll wake up tomorrow morning at 6, maybe 5:45, meditate, do my morning ritual, and then I'll have a giant bowl of oatmeal. Right. So I'll probably go like literally 28 and a half to 31 hours. Depending on, I think I stopped eating last night around 9:00. So, what is that? 24, 3, 7, 4. So it's like 30 hours, 30 and a half hours. If I eat tomorrow morning at like, say 6:15 or 6:30, it'll be like 30 and a half hours. Right. So like, then tomorrow I just eat normally, I'll eat 4 to 6 times, whatever I essentially feel like eating tomorrow. And then I'll just keep doing the same thing. And again, for women, don't know a lot of women that are that hardcore, but most women that I know that are pretty advanced and really good at this will probably go 20 to 21 hours. And again, it depends on how fat you are, how much, when I say how fat, I mean like how much literal body fat you want to lose. That determines on your macros, right? So if you're a person that has a lot of body fat to lose, depending on your body type and whatever, you should absolutely minimize your carbohydrate consumption. Because again, you got to floor your insulin signal and also increase the time that you're fasting, increase quality protein, increase essential fatty acid consumption to get the body into that state where, glucogen is kind of the primary power or fuel source, and that will enhance metabolism, and it'll enhance resting metabolic rate, and it will also enhance thermogenesis over time. So the less carbs you eat when you do break your fast, as such, the next day, even when you're eating during your training day, the less carbs you consume, the faster you're going to get body fat to come off. Now, obviously, if you're a lean guy and you walk around the world like 10% or body fat or more, like I do year round, it's not as serious, or it's not as, I'm not as calculated as my carbohydrate consumption because I don't need to be. Right. But if you're 25% body fat or 22% body fat and you're a dude and you want to get down into 15% or 12% and look a lot better with your shirt off, then you obviously got to be much more conscious of your carbohydrate consumption.
Yeah. And so when we talk about fasting, what can people have and what can they not have? I get questions about this a lot. Can you have vitamin supplements? Can you have amino acids? Can you have butter coffee, which is obviously people are talking about, well, I'm not hungry. Well, yeah, you consumed a quarter stick of butter. Of course, you're not hungry. What can people actually have?
Yeah, so good question. So technically, you can't have anything. And I'm fasting right now. This is a 0-calorie drink with caffeine in it, right? So, it's partially water with a little bit of like caffeine. There's no electrolytes or anything like that. I always tell people when you're fast adapted, you can get away with a couple of calories from like, a squirt, like a Mio or one of those things, versus somebody who's not fast adapted, or for somebody who is like really like hardcore trying to lose fat the fastest way. You cannot take branched chain amino acids. That's protein, right? As soon as you take branched chain amino acids, your fast is broken. Now, again, are people going to debate and say, yeah, but dude, it's just pure protein. I'm already in ketosis. Blah. So, I mean, sure, it's not going to be that negative or deleterious to your efforts, but it's not fasting. No, anything like butter, bulletproof coffee or any of that shit, that's not fasting. No. As soon as, honestly, that is a scam. I won't talk against people and stuff like that. But the reality is that as soon as you start putting, very high calorie, adjuvants like butter or cream or anything that's, just pure fat or lard, you're still giving yourself calories and you're still interfering with the body's thermodynamic response, and effects. And so ultimately there's really nothing that you can eat other than like black coffee, of course, water with caffeine. You can chew nicotine gum, which I always have on hand. Obviously, we talk about this in the blowtorch diet and of course, guaranteed shredded. I mean, nicotine is like an amazing nootropic. And it's also, of course, been just hammered by the world because most people think that nicotine is addictive, when in fact, it's not nicotine that's addictive. It's the additives that the cigarette manufacturers put in their cigarettes along with nicotine. But if you talk to any shaman, right, and any indigenous shaman in South America, they'll tell you that nicotine has been part of their diets for 400 years, and they're not addicted to it in any stretch of the imagination. And again, I've written articles about nicotine, and of course, we have a big section in the book on the blowtorch diet, and it's an amazing nootropic.
Yeah, can we jump on that for just a second? What are some of your favorite nootropics out there? I mean, there's so many things, and there's so many things that get labeled as that. What are some of your top, like your best bang for your buck nootropics?
So for me, and again, obviously I'm biased, nothing beats modafinil. I use a quarter dose of modafinil, right? And whenever I want to write, get really, really creative, I use a quarter dose of modafinil. Some of my best writings came under the influence of modafinil. When I look at nootropics, I am like, this is modafinil, and everything else, is below modafinil. Now, obviously, I know there are people that are non-responders to modafinil. There really are. There's people all around the world that get nothing from it. I don't believe in like speed adjuvants like Adderall or any of its, there's conversants. There's all sorts of, generics and names of that stuff. I know a lot of people are prescribed to those things, but, I always talk about whenever you use speed, it's the whole principle of what goes up must come down. So it's like, I really don't like those, whereas with modafinil, for those people that get a really heightened, response and effect from it, again, minimum effective dosage, and there's zero receptor attenuation. So you're not going to you could use it for 6 months to a year, if you're highly deep in your creative process, and come off cold turkey and you're going to be fine. There's no receptor attenuation. Whereas with Adderall, bro, fuck no. You come off Adderall, which again is speed, you're going to have issues with that. There's a million natural, what would be called nootropics. I just wrote, or not I, but a guy that I just hired to write for my website, jccampbell.com, just wrote an article last week about new nootropics that have come into the marketplace. His name is Lucas Aowen. He's a brilliant guy, 24-year-old kid from Australia. He's brilliant, but he researches all these different synaptic pathway nootropics and stuff like that. So, I can send you the link, or I'll just give you the link so you guys can put it in the show notes. But he's got like 2 new ones, and then he's like deeply in the research of all the new stuff that's coming out. And he swears that both of these, and I don't even know the names. I think one's called bromopane and the other one is, I can't even remember. He's so beyond my knowledge, but there's a lot of stuff that's going to be coming. But for me, again, when I look at nootropics, we created, a company that I was a part of, which I'm not anymore, a over-the-counter supplement called Energy Memory Focus from Optimized Life Nutrition. And I used to be one of the partners, but I don't work with those guys anymore. God bless them. But their company is still they make a very awesome over-the-counter nootropic. And I'm sure there's probably a handful of companies out there right now. Like I have all these guys' stuff. Qualia, and there's of course Joe Rogan's company on it. There's a bunch of companies out there now that make over-the-counter nootropic formulations that are good and quality. But again, I always will quantify if I'm going to rate all of them, because I've tried most of them, even my stuff, Energy Memory Focus is amazing, but I always put Moda right here and then everything else below it. But, Lucas has told me that there is stuff out there now in nature that we're much more finding that is just as similar to modafinil with less side effects. And again, there's no side effects for me for Moda. Some people say that if they don't drink water and hydrate, that they can get headaches at the end of the day when they use it. But I have never had any side effects from it. But again, I'm only using 200 milligram cap. So I'm taking 50 milligrams. Once a day.
You're fully optimized. So your body does tend to, react probably much better than, most people on anything.
Question, without question, I have very low systemic inflammation. So there's no question that anything that I take I'm going to respond or I'm going to feel at, a very, very, very modest level of whatever it is I use. And yeah, I mean, honestly, we should probably talk a little bit about that. Is, inflammation is what causes all the problems, right? Yep. Disease, degradation, cellular degradation, any sort of insensitivity, it all comes from, physiological inflammation, and honestly, like, to go really deep medicine man shaman on you, like, that all comes from some sort of lack of love and trust of self, which is ultimately fear. You have some form, people that have anxiety or they can't sleep at night, it's because they have some sort of internal unintegrated trauma from something that happened to them in this life or a past life that they haven't dealt with. And it leads to fear. And fear, unintegrated, as I say, or trauma unintegrated, having fear for lifelong, dude, that causes the diseases of aging. That causes everything: cancer, heart disease, diabetes, neurodegenerative disorders. That's another thing, we just talked about this on the podcast I did with a guy a couple of days ago. I can't even think of his name right now, but all the leading research now, if you want to not get have neurodegenerative disorder, so, dementia, Alzheimer's, you got to use metformin, because metformin stops amyloid plaque formation, which they now know is like the leading cause of neurodegenerative disorder. And again, where does amyloid plaque formation come from, bro? It's type 3 diabetes. It's essentially the breakdown due to, not eating correctly, eating too much carbohydrates, shutting down your insulin, your pancreas and your insulin, causing insulin insensitivity, crashing your pancreas chemoreceptors, which leads to the gunk or the buildup of amyloid plaque. So if you want to suppress, again, obviously amyloid plaque formation, along with a million other things about metformin, you want to use metformin. And as you already said earlier, metformin, I think we were talking off the air, like metformin suppresses, obviously brain gunk. It cleans the vascular pathways. It obviously crashes and crushes insulin. So, you don't have inflammation at the cellular level. I mean, it does so many amazing things that, like, and we wrote about this in, the most recent article that we wrote on metformin, which is like the game-changing article on metformin. It's already been published by the Harvard Review. The reality is that metformin should only not be taken by power athletes before a meet, because it's so effective at suppressing insulin and so effective at reducing maximum glucose output that you don't want to be a power lifter or strongman, professional strongman, and, being on metformin like at your meet, right? Because it's so effective that it can literally, minimize your maximum glucose output, which you're going to need, for a giant, explosive power movement. So it's like, I always tell people, Stan Efferding is a really good friend of mine. Mm-hmm. And he's one of the smartest guys when it comes to talking about, for bodybuilders and strength athletes, like, should you or shouldn't use metformin? And, he always quotes me and I always quote him. It's so awesome. But, and I love that guy. He's so smart. But, he'll say, like, Jay Campbell's going to counter me. And so I always say, when I'm on my podcast, I'll say, but Stan Efferding's going to counter me. But he's right. I mean, for a strength athlete at a meet, you should not be using metformin. You should absolutely stop. But other than that, all people on the planet, to maximize life, to extend life, to enhance the cellular processes, and again, to crush cellular inflammation and cellular degradation, you should be using metformin. And, we probably don't have the time to go deep down the rabbit hole about metformin, but, most people, women, 250 milligrams AM, 250 milligrams PM, most men, 500 and 500. And then when you get used to it, your body gets used to metformin, because remember, the one thing it does better than anything else is it cleans the microbiome, right? So all that nasty shit in your stomach, if you want to be an awesome faster, you got to use metformin too, because it kills all the nasty shit in your stomach that makes you feel like shit when you're fasting. So metformin is just like a blowtorch to just enhance the biochemical processes of fasting, because it kills all that nasty shit in your stomach. But, I've progressed, and I've been on metformin for 20 years. I've progressed to a gram AM and a gram PM. And all the clinical research and the data shows that, like, that's the max, right? Because it has like a net tissue buildup effect. Most of the research is at 850 and 850. So it's like 1700 milligrams versus what I take, which is 2 a day. The only other thing that should be mentioned about metformin is, again, like, if you want to cheat and you want to splurge, you can just take a metformin right before you, pound whatever you're going to take down, and it just crashes and suppresses that insulin cascade or that spike that you're going to get from eating like shit. So, it helps in that regard too.
And so what I hear you saying is it's kind of a trade-off because, you do have people that talk about the muscle building. Like I've heard both sides of the argument, but it sounds like the health overall, how important is your health to you versus maybe not making the extreme muscle gain? I mean, have you seen any of that? Because they always...
No, yeah. So for sure, bro. And like my article, covers all of that.
We got to put a link to that.
Dr. Peter Attia, I've debated him and he's debated me about that and stuff like that, but he's even changed his tune now because he just agrees now with what you said, that in the long-term effect, it's better to be on metformin for the life extension purposes than it is to not be able to have the rate limiting of mTOR. Right. And again, but just to that point, to address that point, any guy who is using therapeutic testosterone, it's a non sequitur, right? Absolutely has no effect. Now, if you're a natural dude, is there a possibility that, using metformin will limit your gains? Not if you're eating right and training at the capacity. Most guys, especially guys that are in their 40s and 50s that are not using therapeutic testosterone, who still are training like they were in their 20s and 30s, are actually limiting their gains because they're overtraining. Mm-hmm. It's like it's a what do you call it? It's a psychosis. Like you got to be in the gym, you got to be training 90 minutes or whatever. It's like your body cannot handle, that physiological and adaptive response to the training that you were doing in your 20s and 30s. And this, right? Like there's so many guys out there, they're still in their fucking 50s, bro, doing like 4 plates on the squat. Like, what the fuck are you doing? Right? Like, what's the point? You're not competing for a trophy. You're not trying to get paid, right? It's ego.
Bro, it's an addiction. Let me tell you. I'm one of those guys. Right. It's an addiction, though, for real. I'm not joking. It really is a mental addiction to the iron.
Believe me, I totally get it. But when your fourth vertebrae dislodges, you'll probably think twice. I mean, it's funny you say that because I literally was a big deadlift squat guy up until I was 46. And my chiropractor, who's a brilliant guy, chiropractors are stars out here. He showed me a video of a guy, guy like you, and like what happened to him. And I was just like, I walked away from that session that day in his office and I never squatted ever again. Now that's, not like I'm not doing body squats in my gym right now. Like squatting is amazing. Nobody's ever going to get against that, but it really does fuck up your spine. Yep. And, you get to a certain age, you don't have synovial fluid in your spine cavities like you had in your 40s, or you're even in your 30s. And like, it just takes one imbalance and you're done. You're not walking anymore.
Yeah. That's we need to have another podcast because, dude, we didn't talk about mindfulness. We didn't talk about.
Dude, I'd love to come back on.
I just stuff.
Did one with Chris Gethin, and he was the same way. He was like, bro, fuck, man, we got to do another one. So we did another one next week. So I'd be happy to come on and talk, bro. No problem.
Dude, I would love it. We're out of time, folks. I tell you what, I just want to thank our guest today, Jay Campbell, for investing in all of our listeners today. It was like drinking from a fire hose, and it was well worth it. So thank you, Jay, for being on the show.
Well, let me just say this before I end it. Anybody who watches this podcast who wants any of my books, the 2 biggest ones, top sellers, I give them away for free. I'll just give you the link. We just created it for podcasts now. I did it about a month ago. It's jccampbell.com/free books. And, all you have to do is just put your email in there, and the books come as downloadable PDFs. It's the Testosterone Optimization Therapy Bible, and of course the Blowtorch Diet. And I also have, which this will go in there, I have links to like all the best podcasts I've done. So, obviously the Ben Greenfield, the Ben Pekulski, the Dave Palumbo podcast, they're all there. And I even have a bunch of other ones on spirituality and stuff like that there. So if, people want to find out more about me, it's all there. It's all for free.
Incredible. Everybody get on Jay Campbell's website. I know I've got a ton of stuff I got to check out on your website. So thanks again, Jay, for being on the show.
I appreciate you guys for having me, brother.
Again, I want to thank our sponsors, ZionMissionaryChurch.net, NeuroPowerSource.com, our podcast producer, Drew Kiespert, video director, Jolynn Thomas, and head of talent relations, Mr. Fairfax Hackley. Be sure to rate us and subscribe to the Pressing Limits podcast. Follow us on Instagram for the latest episodes and news. And for more ways to watch and listen to this podcast, check out the Pressing Limits podcast website. Also, be sure to look into Behind the Bits podcast with Scott Curtis.